Well, folks, it's getting to be a little freezing cold here again in Minnesota, but we all got through Wednesday together on this, for some of a short week. But anyway, it's hump day regardless. Excuse me. Jason here with End the Simpademic, and winds was up here again or a little bit below zero. So I just came back from the outside, and of course my voice reflects it. But anyway, I'm going off the reservation again because it's my channel and I can do what I want. But the subject for tonight is simply the future of NATO, which is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It was founded in the wake of World War II as an immediate precursor to the Cold War with the then Soviet Union. And it's basically us, Canada, and Western Europe in an alliance against big bad Russia. Now, earlier this week, a serious wrench got thrown into the future of this alliance, and that was with United Kingdom or UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Now, if that's not a beta name, I don't know what is, but Prime Minister Starmer said that he was considering severing diplomatic relations with the United States. And if this sounds absolutely apeshit crazy, it is. Because the UK, I don't think, realizes where they would be on the international stage without the United States. And the reason why Mr. Starmer is pitching a fit is because of President Trump's support and alliance with Elon Musk. And he says, well, if he doesn't dump Elon Musk, he's just going to cut all ties with the United States. And I thought to myself, well, you know what this does? It's the end of NATO. That would destroy NATO immediately, because that alliance does not exist without the connection between the UK and the United States. So if NATO disappears, and if Mr. Starmer is successful in busting the alliance based on his own pettiness and stupidity, do we replace it with anything? And my answer is yes. It's an idea that I didn't come up with. It's an idea that's been kind of tossed about a little bit off and on over the last 10 years or so. And I would call it PRTO. PRTO, Pacific Rim Treaty Organization. I would argue at this point that the greater threat to, I wouldn't even call it world peace at this point, but it's just basically world order and balance at this point, is not Russia, because Russia, as the Ukraine war has shown, is a lot weaker than we thought it to be. Vladimir Putin portrayed an image of strength, and it turns out it's a fraud. He doesn't have enough people. He doesn't have enough weapons. His weapons are corrupted by corrupt generals within the Red Army, and a recent estimate that I saw based on present casualties and loss of equipment in Ukraine, Russia's going to run out of tanks in about 2 years or less. They right now are losing faster than they can replace them. And according to the math, they will be entirely out within 2 years. A lot of their equipment that they do have, as far as, armor for their soldiers is concerned, what are supposed to be metal armor is actually stuffed with toilet paper instead. And that's because the generals bought equipment with a lot of the vital qualities and ingredients stripped from them. So instead of an iron plate, maybe it's got stuffed toilet paper inside of it instead. And the difference between having to buy that versus what is budgeted goes directly in those generals' pockets. This is why when I looked at the Senate confirmation hearings for our Defense Secretary nominee Pete Hegseth, talking about generals not being allowed to enter the defense contracting industry, and I thought to myself, well, if Russia has shown us anything, it's that generals can be corrupt while in service. They're probably more honest in Russia working for a defense contractor as opposed to working for the army itself. When Vladimir Putin wants to sack or get rid of generals, he just has to say it's a corruption. They're found guilty of, it's a corruption investigation, and they've been found guilty of it. Well, of course they have, because all the generals are corrupt over there. And Pete Hegseth in that particular hearing, I think, was very aware of this. So for those various reasons I just mentioned kind of right behind me here, Russia is not the big threat that it used to be. Their economy is right now, despite what Vladimir Putin tells everybody, the economy is in shambles because the West has sanctioned them into oblivion. They have a national federal bank interest rate of 21%. And the ruble exchange rate compared to the US dollar is at the worst ratio it's ever been. 124, I think it is, to 1 as of the last time I saw it. As opposed to even just last year, it was like 80 to 1. So economically, the bank interest rates and the fact that they're blowing 40% of their GDP on military spending at this point. They also have a demographic problem. They don't have enough people to fill the jobs in their private sector economy. This is multifold. Obviously, because of the loss of 700 plus soldiers in Ukraine as of the last count in the 2 years since the so-called special military operation began. And you also have a huge number of young people fleeing the country in fear of being drafted, which is not happening in the big cities of Moscow and St. Petersburg, but it is happening in Siberia and the rest of the country. So young people who could fill those jobs are leaving the country entirely. Excuse me. They're heading for Western Europe and basically name the country, they're probably heading there. So if Russia's not the big threat, how is China the big threat? Well, economically, they have their own set of problems, but the problem with China right now is they've been very aggressive in the South China Sea, creating artificial islands to expand their international waters, which gives them access to resources and allows them to build military bases a little bit too close for comfort to some of their neighbors, such as the Philippines, Japan, etc., etc. So going back to this alliance, what would the Pacific Rim alliance look like? The countries involved, in my guesstimation, and there may be a couple of additions I'm not thinking of right now, but obviously it would include the United States. I think it would also include Canada. This alliance would also include South Korea, Japan, India, the Philippines, most likely Vietnam, and Mongolia. There's probably a couple of other Southeastern Asian countries that you could probably throw in the mix, but I'm not entirely sold on those just yet, such as Thailand or Laos. This would be a bulwark against China's aggression, and I think for fear of infuriating them, at least initially, would not include Taiwan. although they've been saber-rattling that for decades now. And we already have a defense pact basically with Japan and South Korea. And those two countries, in turn, also contribute large amounts of weapons in manufacturing. So that part of the alliance already basically exists. And these countries are strong contributors. They have a lot to offer. So Japan and South Korea are slam dunks. The Philippines, we already have military bases in the Philippines. They provide a lot of economic capital. They don't really manufacture anything over there that we utilize. And of course, their location is also prime. And they once were an American colony, by the way. They didn't gain their independence from us until 1948. So they're in. Mongolia would be an interesting addition based on their geographic location. They're the country that's wedged between China and Russia. If you point them out on a map, they're just really perfectly wedged there. They're also a Western-style democracy, which almost all of their neighbors are not. And that location would obviously be their major contribution, because you having them as a launching pad for defense against Russian or Chinese aggression would be huge. Vietnam is also a economic second world country right now that has become more friendly with the United States ever since the Vietnam War. And I think they can definitely be included because they're also threatened by Chinese aggression in the South China Sea. A lot of their territory has also been threatened and could potentially be compromised in the future. India, the second most powerful country in this entire group. They have been substantial weapons manufacturers. They're a nuclear power. And yes, they have been threatened by the Chinese as well. They have They have actually purchased oil from Russia on the cheap under the terms of the international sanctions. Countries that still choose to buy oil from Russia cannot pay more than $60 a barrel. On the international markets, that's about 2/3 of what everyone else gets. So India is negotiating deals for cheap. And, of course, they share a border in the Himalayas with Nepal on their side, and then Nepal in turn shares a border with Tibet on the Chinese side. So it's not geographically too big of a bridge at all between the two countries. Might I add, the two not quite superpowers, but close. India is now the most populous country in the world. They have overtaken China. Their country. I've always believed that we need to have a closer relationship with India, and particularly the Modi government, Narendra Modi, their prime minister. This is something that Trump worked on extensively in his first term, and I expect him to continue to do so in this term. And I think bringing them into a new alliance after Starmer blows up NATO. Because China is the real threat these days and not Russia or the former Soviet Union, which obviously doesn't exist anymore. So yes, we would be cut loose from NATO. The big argument that Trump has always made is that most NATO countries do not contribute their share to the defense of the group as a whole. With this particular Pacific Rim treaty organization that I'm proposing, This would not be an issue because a lot of these countries already do. We contribute to Japan and South Korea's national defense with manpower. They in turn contribute it with world-class weapons production. We already get a good deal from those countries. So anyway, hopefully Mr. Beta male Keir Starmer, once he blows up NATO, I see some things of this particular type of new alliance to replace NATO in play. Some things are already in motion, some things are already in place. It would not be all that difficult to put together and to have a similar agreement to Article 5 of NATO, which says that an attack against one is an attack against all. This alliance would absolutely scare the bejesus out of Kim Jong-un in North Korea because he knows that if he launches an invasion against the South, his regime is toast. His regime is already on thin ice as it is. But a NATO type of thing with South Korea involved, and to then have the full wrath of two countries in particular that I think would just destroy them, and that's us, the United States, and India. Nuclear powers in our own right. This would be a union of strength, much more than NATO is. And NATO is the strongest alliance the world has ever seen. But it would pale in comparison to this. So anyway, this is my rant for the night, my international politics rant for the night. This is Jason within the Simpademic. Stay warm wherever you are. It's getting much colder here tonight. We'll see you all tomorrow night. And peace out. Sleep tight. And don't let the don't let the snowflakes bite or the icicles crack, depending on where you are. Peace out.